This is the conversation I had with Angela Olea. She's the founder of Assisted Living Locators. Starting as a nurse, Angela saw a critical need and created the nation's first senior placement franchise, scaling it to over 160 locations. Angela shared powerful lessons and insights on rapid growth, resilience during crises, and navigating pivotal career transitions. So, Angela, there's many different directions, many different things I wanted to ask you. Why don't we start off by recapping what you learned from the YPO conference that you just came back from?
Well, I actually had to back conferences. I attended the global YPO in Barcelona,
Uh-huh.
and I finished that one February 28th. I went to the YPO for Mardi Gras in New
Oh, did you?
Orleans. I had 2 very different conferences. One was global with over 2,700 people in attendance in
Uh-huh.
Barcelona, and the second one was 80 people, the farthest one being in Australia, attending Mardi Gras.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. I mean, I love conferences. I love to go to retreats. This is sort of my lifestyle. I'm curious, why do you do it?
I do it for different reasons. The 2,700 people for the global, that was only my second international EDGE conference. And that really brings people from all over the country and innovations for those people who are in franchising, like the IFA, their annual conference. It's something that they've got different sessions, different learning tracks. You meet people, you get different experiences. It's very intentional. You have to select because you've got so many things happening. You've got to really be intentional and set up meetings ahead of time or know that you want to learn. That was my first time in Spain, first time out of country for one of their events. And so that was very different. I didn't know what I didn't know, but it checked all the boxes. It was amazing.
Very different business than yours, but it looks really cool. So, what any top takeaways on what are the top trending topics
Boy, I
that
tell you, the classes that were so full that they had to really open it up was AI. You could
mm,
not get away from the AI topic and how it's impacting us and what is the future of AI in the workplace and growing one's business and in the vendors that we work with. And then very separate from that were the healthcare sessions, how they can treat your ailments based on DNA and what's happening with really getting specific with that. So I did those 2. I did the tech and I did the healthcare. What was really impactful as well is 2 of the guests that were there were talking about generational businesses, and one was the gun manufacturer, Beretta, and 500-year-old company, 15 generations, and the other was Ferragamo, who is 15 years, 3rd generation. Very different and insightful when you get to really peek under the hood of what families generational and literally 500 years is
I
amazing.
mean, that's a lot. And I actually have a guest coming up shortly. He is officially a count. He's actually royalty. Whose family has basically hundreds of years. They're in the fashion industry. So I can't wait to actually talk to him. Less about the business mechanics, more about the psychology of what it means to be born into essentially a dynasty type of family. But I'm curious, what did you learn about generational wealth and companies and, if
You
you can
know,
share, if you don't mind sharing?
they were very different in how they conducted. I would say Ferragamo, it was very specific. One thing they both had in common, and I've heard this in talking with families, that the families, you have to go to college is kind of a general rule. And then you have to work for other companies for at least 2 years before you come back to the family business. And I
Mm,
think that has been pretty the universal thread. Now, other than that, there's so many different dynamics in the businesses and how they conduct it. And who they permit and if there's a head count on how many family members can be in it, that really varies. But the universal was get experience, get educated, and bring value back with a set of eyes that is something other than what you're going to get from being within the family.
Is that something that you're thinking about, passing down your empire down to your kids and next generations and things like that?
Well, when I started Assisted Living Locators, my daughter, she's been officially on the books for 10 years and unofficially I started 20 years ago. So she started working from a young age and doing anything and everything. And so when I left the company December 31st. I
Mm,
sold in 2022. So I exited with private equity in 2022. And when I officially left this in December, she stayed on. So
mhm.
she was working side by side with me. It was amazing having her as part of the organization. That was one of the things with stepping away from a company that I launched 20 years ago, knowing that I had somebody who had that historical data and really that it was in great hands. They replaced me. The CEO who took over for me, my daughter is her right hand. And I anticipate that within a couple of years, my daughter's going to be leading the company. I've had a taste of it myself. And for me, it was the best of all worlds having to be able to work side by side with my daughter.
That kinda goes against the typical business adage, don't work with family or things like that. So I'm actually curious, what was it like? Were you able to was it mom and daughter and CEO, founder, and right-hand person? Can you kind of wear different hats easily, or is it,
Yeah, yeah, in the workplace, she addressed me as Angela. Right from the beginning, I had to really set those boundaries of don't question, when I'm in here, I'm not mom. This is not negotiation. She started off doing franchise support, administration, office manager, and worked herself all the way up a VP of business development and strategic growth. So, she took every job and earned it. And I was really twice as hard on her, holding her accountable just because I knew really how far I could push in helping her grow and understanding the opportunity in front of her. But secondly, because I knew she was going to get twice as hard scrutiny. And did she earn this or was she given this? So there was always going to be a shadow that I would cast on her capabilities, regardless of what she was doing independent of me.
was there any particularly difficult moments as mom slash founder that you had to be, interact with your daughter that you could share with us that maybe you learned some lessons from like, oh, okay, don't do that again, or no, definitely do that again.
Yeah, it different now. Again, she's been with the organization for 10 years. So from very young age and when she did first start, I mean, there was some immaturity and there was some testing of the boundaries, what the expectation was as far as even coming into the office on a daily basis, being on time, and just some wiggle room that she thought she had with that. And so that was really the extent of that. She's always been very hardworking and she wants to please me. She wanted to really show me that she could do it and that she was capable of getting up on that next rung on the ladder. I would say probably one of the biggest challenges I had, and this wasn't on her necessarily, it was when we sold to private equity. It was making sure that there was a male counterpart of hers that was there was some pay discrepancy in it. And as her role continued to increase, it was challenging for me to try to shorten or tighten up that gap. But again, with her being my daughter, the optics were really challenging with the private equity on expressing that because again, seeing that line, what was I doing? What was she doing? And
Hmm.
was she just getting brownie points? But what I can tell you right now with the new CEO who's in there, she cannot sing enough of my daughter's praises. She is just like, I'm getting you an assistant. How do you do all of this now without me being there? There's no question of her competencies, her skills, and her visionary ability to really take it to the next level.
So knowing what you know today, somebody else say, hey, I want to invite my brother, my best friend, my spouse to join my business. What would you say to that? Do it or don't do it, or it depends, or what would you say
It's
to
gonna
them?
depend because I've had other family members that were very short lasting in the company,
Mhm.
and I was swift to say this would decimate us as a family. we would be bringing that hostility into the home or into the family setting. And so those dynamics, it's really recognizing what your expectations are of that individual. And if you're able to separate it once you get home, and we were very, very good about socially, it was now we just went right back into mom daughter. And when
Mm,
we were in the workplace, it was Angela and addressing me as such, setting appointments, getting on my calendar, things like that. So we really enforced those rules. If you understand somebody's work ethic and maybe even doing personality testing and things like that, have a backup, a contingency of a trial, just like you would give somebody else like a 90-day. And if you recognize that it's gonna create a dynamic that is gonna put one person higher than another in the home setting, that could be very challenging.
mm. You had mentioned a personality test. So you're a believer of personality tests?
I am, I think they're a great tool.
Any specific type, by the way?
Well, in franchising, we used the first one that we used was Zoracle for
Mm,
people that, and it actually just changed. It recently changed names, but the founder of Zoracle also created this new one. So, what we did was took our top 20 performing franchisees that also had traits that if they were high performing, but they weren't compliant, that ruled them out. So they had to check the boxes. So we wanted our highest performing, but also those that embodied the franchising way.
mm.
And then people coming in test against that one and they get graded. It talks about if they're a fit or not fit. I was not a fit. I took my own test. It
Took
was
your own
such
test, you wanted to fit? What?
yeah, so I use that as a great tool, but I always would do the interviewing on that and push back on some of the areas if they had a lower I would ask them, "Did you read that? Did you find that this was an accurate description of how you are in these different settings? And then how does that translate?" So it is a tool,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, interviewing and putting some weight into that, but also having the one-to-one conversations of are they in agreement with it and can they get out of their own way for this career?
What do you mean by can they get themselves out of their own way?
Maybe their career that they had, in the franchising world, we had people that came from Wall Street, maybe somebody who was in a C-suite executive, who in their prior life was just an absolute bear in the boardroom. Just it could be somebody who actually did bookkeeping. And when they became a franchisee, they had to really meet with families, have that very empathetic caring soul that connected with not only the perspective, usually the adult child, and then dealing with a family member, but you also had to have your sales hat because we worked with providers to find out do they measure up? What do they bring to the table? And then for the referral sources who had clients that were the elderly patients to refer to us. So you really had 3 different areas. And so it was really making sure they understood you may have a big heart and you may want to really give back to the seniors, but if you can't put your sales hat on
Mhm.
and really spread the word about this wonderful service that exists to help seniors and their family in their transition, I it's not gonna work.
If in effect you were essentially like a startup school, I mean, I hate to say it that way, but you're like a fast training accelerator for people who were an employee to essentially ramp up and transform. So they had to change themselves to let the job mold and shape them in sales, in being empathetic. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an intense, helping them become experts at what they do, getting dementia certified, really understanding all the aspects. So, and that's franchising in general. In franchising, you're really providing a book of business and hopefully you're providing that support so that if people are starting off on an uneven starting point, that we really bring everybody up to speed when they're at a certain level. And that's what this was an industry where people referred back and forth to one another. Mom
Mhm,
might be in Florida, but daughter might be in New York. So we've
mhm.
got different offices working together, and they want to know that they're referring to somebody who is competent, who is caring, who maintains our four-step process, just like the McDonald's Big Mac.
Yeah.
That two all beef patty, sausage, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onion on a sesame seed bun. You really need those processes in place each and every time. And then you vary as needed. But that's part of a franchise is your ability to scale is having consistency of services.
So there's 2 different directions I wanna go. So I wanna mention both, and then we'll dive into
Okay.
one, whichever you choose. One direction is I'd love to hear your personal transformation because you start off as a nurse with a big heart and probably don't have a lot of sales skills and experiences. So I'd love to hear the transformation of your own. And the second one is around creating consistent. You mentioned McDonald's. McDonald's is a physical thing. You can look at it. Like, is this burger the same as this other burger? Whereas yours is intangible, it's a service, it's a felt experience. So I don't know how to gauge experience one versus experience two. Do you have a preference which direction we go?
So my mother's a nurse, my father was an entrepreneur, and I kind of had both always ingrained in me from a young age. My parents, we had to earn money, and I raised my kids the same way. You want money? I have a job. How much do you want? Will determine the job that I assign. And I grew up with that mentality.
I
And
love that.
so
You run your household like a company.
from day one,
I love
I
that.
get $50. Fantastic. Terrific.
I love that. I'm gonna take in my future family when I have kids, I'm gonna do it that way.
Yeah, every dollar has an activity that you
I
can
love
kind of
that.
pick and choose. It has a weight. But growing up, I, from a young age, earned my own money for spending. And so my parents both worked. So I learned from a young age too, if I did sports or did anything, I lived on an island in Savannah, Georgia, getting to and from these activities. I had to dial for dollars, get on the phone and call and really network and make it happen. I have always, and I'm the youngest of three. I think that when you've got siblings, that gives you're a strategist. You learn all kinds of life tools. But I started out in the nursing and I worked on a cardiac unit at a level one trauma center. And I just took every opportunity for every class that they offered. And I happened to be one of the youngest on that unit, but I wanted to fast track and be in charge and go to administration and work down that career path. But what I quickly realized in working with the elderly, especially in a state like I had moved and had went to college in Arizona. So transplanted from Savannah. Now I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. And a very transient state where we had a lot of winter visitors that would come, but their family members, the adult children, would be in other states. And so that's where I really saw where we would discharge seniors and they would come immediately back to the hospital or come back within a week, come back certainly within 30 days, a very high percentage. And just really frustration and seeing that, like, what is the safety net that we have in place for these people? And that's what sitting down with a social worker and getting in her business, because mine was admitting and discharging, taking care of the patient and then discharging them. And you've got a certain number of beds, but what happens after discharge? And so, really getting in that space and finding out. And that's when the whole world of assisted living was opened up to me that there's homes that are licensed, it could be licensed for 4 people, and then there's buildings that have 200 beds and take care of their apartment style, and so trying to determine how she was making the selection she was making, and she had a handful of brochures, and I said, "Well, boy, you've got about 15 brochures. Are there 15 properties, 150, 1,000 properties? Have you ever been to one? What qualified?" Boy, every question that I asked, I was just very sad that there was no satisfying answer. She did the best that she could with what she had. And there really wasn't anything set up for ensuring that the people are being discharged to the appropriate places with the proper credentialing and being taken care of in the manner that you would expect. And so every question I just kept asking kept moving me further and further. Then I wanted to see what some assisted livings and then how did they fill their beds? How do people learn about these properties? Is there the state ranking. I just kept asking more and more. And before I realized it, I knew that that was a passion and mission, that everything I'd done up to that point, that that was setting me up for really creating this advocacy for seniors and their families and providing that support to healthcare people so that we could safely transition families, seniors in their time of need.
Mm,
And so it was a mission. I wasn't looking for it. It just kept taking me further and further and further. And before I knew it, I just knew 100% with certainty, without any question, that this was something that I was called to do. And so I launched that business
So
local.
pause real quick,
Yeah.
because the way you're describing it, it's like, oh yeah, this just kind of came to me and then I just did it, right? But normally, any kind of new entrepreneurs, especially from someone who was 9 to 5 to starting something, there's usually a lot of doubts, a lot of like uncertainty. I don't know if I could do it. Did you ever gone through that period at all?
The only thing I questioned at that time was, being in the hospital, I would always have a job and it was golden handcuffs, like I knew, but I think at the time I was making maybe $80,000. But in that time, that was a lot of money. That was my family's money. That was security. I just, in my mind, that was my only thing, is I wanted to make sure that I did not put my family at risk for launching it. This was over several months of these questions, kind of dipping my toe, but I kept circling back to it. When I finally decided, I knew with certainty that it wouldn't take that many seniors to help to replace my income. Then I founded the first senior placement franchise in the US. That was 20 years ago. I knew after I launched locally in Scottsdale that I was getting calls from other places, from
Whoa, whoa,
Florida.
whoa. So you already knew from the get-go, this is gonna be a franchise from the
Within 2 years, I launched franchising. I actually tried to get employees in some of these other states, but it was like herding cats. I couldn't maintain that consistency and ensuring that they were following each little step in the process that I wanted to follow. There really wasn't the teeth and supervision. I researched what is the path for really maintaining the consistency of upholding these standards that I
Mhm,
took from nursing into the senior placement world. Franchising was the key, but there was nothing that was founded that I could follow in the footsteps. So with an attorney, a franchise attorney, we created a hybrid that took the knowledge of some different franchises and then created an algorithm of what we needed to create a territory.
mm.
And
So, Angela, pardon me, because I don't really know the franchise world at all. So, how is it different? So, I'm assuming, correct me, right? So, a franchisee, they're incentivized to follow the rules, the regulation that you set from the franchisor, whereas employees, their incentive, their motivation is basically keep my job, right? So,
yep.
is that the reason why the franchise model works better in terms of adherence to the standards that you set is much higher? Is that from your perspective?
Yeah, they've got a buy-in. So the franchisees are paying you money to be part of your process,
Mhm,
to learn from you. So they've really got a vested interest in getting that fast track to understanding, learning, and launching their business.
mhm,
Whereas employees, it's a very different model. And our franchisees have employees. So
mhm,
I'm not saying all employees, but I'm saying the core, the
mhm,
person has to be local. Our model works best where you've got that local person who is really supervising and running their team, but
mhm,
they started it feet on the street themselves.
mhm.
They knew it. And so their employees are now their responsibilities to maintain it. For me, again, I wanted to grow fast and trying to hire employees and grow fast and do these other things. Like I said, herding cats is probably the best analogy that
Mhm.
I can give. It just wasn't a fit for where I was at with what I was trying to accomplish.
So question, why did you want to grow fast? Is it just more ambition or is this like a window of opportunity that's closing?
I knew I was getting calls from all over the country. "Is there
Uh,
somebody like you in my backyard?
I
I
see.
need help."
Yeah.
knew that the volume in my own backyard, that this was something anywhere where there's seniors, where people were going
Mhm.
to experience this need. And so being able to really fill that void and fill that gap, that it was urgency only in the sense that people needed, or if they knew that a service like this was available, boy, they just were like, "Oh my gosh, I needed this so badly."
Mm,
And I feel like we save lives. So I was on
mm.
a mission to really help enhance, prolong, and make it as smooth as possible, this final phase of transition to assisted living or to support that they needed.
So you were really responding to the market, so to speak, responding to the help that people demand but just couldn't get. And then that was still the heart of your desire to scale, not so much the, oh, here's the great opportunity. I mean, there's obviously that. But what I'm getting from you is, you were a nurse, you wanted to help. So then you change yourself and then the model as a way to adapt to the people's requests.
That's 100% accurate.
Beautiful. So we veer away from your transformation. We get into the business model and stuff. But let's come back to your like, what did you have to shift about yourself in order to grow into this new role, this new CEO effectively? That's, thanks to the circumstances.
One of the things I took advantage of early on pre-franchising is that there's an organization called SCORE and it's retired
Mhm.
executives. And so I, again, really leaned into the professionals that were there, and that's what kind of steered me towards franchising. And then really coming from a place, once I embraced and recognized I was going to be in the franchising world, the International Franchise Association, I really took advantage of all the learning that they did, and Arizona was a hotbed for other franchises. Massage Envy was one of it, the big franchises that had some really explosive growth, and I met with their CEO right when I was launching franchising, and I found that others in franchising, other CEOs and founders, etcetera, were willing to share. If you came in, really you did your homework. I went in there with very intentional questions. I called up and basically said, "You don't know me. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. Conquer the world. And I would love your assistance in really learning what you would have done differently, what you've learned about your growth. I'm thinking of this or this." And it was like right, left, right, left. Oh, and very clear. So my acceleration, I was able to really take these learnings from very seasoned franchisors in the industry who are really willing to lift up the hood and let you see and openly acknowledge things that tanked, absolutely went terribly wrong, or mistakes that they made and things that they learned along the way to help me learn. And so that is how I really led my company, is always being in a place of learning and trying to insert myself with people that could enhance and grow my knowledge.
I can see the through line now. You're always being a very learning, growth oriented person. You're very caring about the people that you serve. And then you're not afraid to ask for help. Like, hey, how did you do it? I'm young and eager to learn. Hence why also, I'm assuming, let me know if I'm wrong, you're also very generous with other people calling you for, like, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you show me how you did it? Is that accurate?
That is accurate. And that's why I try to be a mentor and leader to people that are considering embarking on an endeavor, or if they've hit roadblocks, make myself available, not exclusively for women, but letting people understand that you can be a young mom, have circumstances, but really be the architect of your life and
Mm.
design the life that you want to have. The only restrictions you have are your imagination.
Uh-huh. Well, I
Courage.
mean, that's one of the reasons why I do this Noble Warrior podcast, so I can talk to people who live very different lives, who, took a chance, who took a risk, and then manifested their dream, whatever path it may be. Maybe a franchise of nursing home, assisted house living, maybe a coach, maybe a tech entrepreneur. So, this is really the heart of this podcast. Was there any specific mistakes that these seasoned people help you avoid? Like, oh, I'm so glad I've listened to them. I didn't go down that path because I would have made a huge mistake.
They did in the beginning help me critique my book of business so that it avoided really changing throughout the years, subtle changes, but it was so solid in the beginning that what it looks like today, it really is 85% of what it was when I launched. But there were huge mistakes on the way. When you're pioneering a whole new industry, you're learning the rules and the regulations. So I created the pathway for all the other franchisors that came after me that were in the senior placement. They learned, so mine was really how what each rules and regulations were in each state. There were some tough things. It slowed me down
Could you
in
mind
that
sharing
growth.
maybe one or two? Like, what was the particular tough thing? Like,
Yeah, my first plan that I thought I was gonna grow and was gonna be in Florida. Florida had a rule that my book of business couldn't work there. It changed 2 years after I launched. In my scheme of, my whole strategy, I'm like, "Boy, Florida," of course, Florida, Arizona, 2 states that have really the highest number of seniors, and especially seniors that are traveling away from their family members. And I had an error where, I put my trust in somebody who was helping with franchise sales, and I ended up having to buy back a franchise because Texas was a whole new rule. Texas is a different model than it is for us in all the other states. Put my trust in somebody that they did the homework on it, and they didn't. We really had to own that to give that franchisee an opportunity to exit because our model, we had to go back to the drawing board and recreate how it was going to work there. And so that was a painful early lesson, and they're like, "No, buy back my franchise." And that was not the answer that I wanted. So I had a big pivoting points. That person was no longer who I entrusted. So you've gotta have people on your team that you really, when it's that serious and you're dealing with laws and regulations, not everybody really goes deep, and you have to learn. And what I learned in franchising is that trust but verify, and that some people absolutely will make up things because they
mhm.
don't do the work or maybe they don't have the capacity. In that situation, they assured me, I trusted in it and completely moved forward with that. And so it was painful. It was very painful because I had somebody on my internal team that I had to let go, and then I had to go back and look at other things. And then really, when having people in those positions, really having test with them to assure that they really were doing what they were saying they were doing when I put my trust in them.
Yeah, I mean, trust and verify is one of those biggest lessons. It is so simple, like 3 words, trust and verify, but it has explosive growth, and you're just trying to keep up with the demand. Anyways, I think this is worthy of double clicking on. Is there any other things you would like to share and highlight?
Yeah.
I had to change because I wanted to serve my mission. Is there anything else like that?
Being in that role again when I started and midway through my journey, to this day, I still am super close with the nurses that I worked with, and they were part of this is what I think I'm going to do. What do you think? Here's the names. And so they were like a board of directors for me. And to this day, they're just super proud of and have always supported that. And I grew into a board member and really had to put myself in situations where I was going to be taught on what is the code of conduct and how to read the P&Ls and do all of those things. It didn't just happen. I was very intentional with trying to be the best leader. And like you said, manifest every day that I was really the best captain for the ship and that I could really steer the company where I wanted it to go. So when I sold the company in 2022, I knew even before I sold, I thought I was gonna sell it in 2020 and then COVID happened. I thought, well, boy, when I get to 100 franchises, because only 14% of all franchisors ever hit 100 franchises plus. So I just thought, boy, I'll sell it. And I thought, my gosh, I'm having such a great time. I love this. I'm just not ready. And then I thought I'll sell. And then COVID hit. And obviously that wasn't going to be the right time. But I knew I wanted to be part of a platform with sister companies bought by a company that I could stay on for a couple of years and make sure that the transition was good. I wanted to also roll over funds into still maintain ownership
Mm,
in within the investment, as it continues for whatever the years, 5 to 7 years. And so the Riverside company was the company that was the best fit for us. And so the companies we have, it's care in the home, transitional care, which was mine when they're ready to move out, an estate sale company, and then service brands that help people stay independent at home.
mhm.
So it checked all of those boxes. And so when I exited in December, it was after literally 22 years of starting my own company and stepping away. But like I said, I felt so comfortable and confident that it's on the right path and is going to continue
Yeah,
to do what it needs to do.
your baby is in good hands.
And there's thousands now. I don't have a finger toe count on how many thousands and thousands of families and seniors that we've helped throughout the years. Because not only from launching my company, Assisted Living Locators, but all of the franchisors that came after me that are in senior care placement.
Mm.
And so following that roadmap and really creating that whole industry and that whole space. So that's like a legacy that I'm so proud of. I'm not going to get acknowledgement and I'm not looking for that. I just personally know that so many seniors are being helped because I chose to, make that first, put that flag in the ground and, create these standards. And I'm so glad it was me because I set those standards so high in how to conduct it and created that roadmap for others to, do. So
Was there I'm sure it's very satisfying to know that these seniors are in great hands because of the standards that you set. Is there any particular moments when or particular senior or story that you hear that just brings a smile to your face that help you persist even when you're trial with by fire, when there's a lot of stuff happening, you're like, "Oh, yeah, I remember this one. This is the reason why I'm gonna keep going."
oh
As
my
Elon
gosh.
Musk would say, "Stare into the abyss and chew glass," or something like that, right? So is there some is
I
there
had
some Yeah, go
I
ahead.
had a story. One of my earlier clients was a lady named Lila. She had memory care issues back in the day. My daughter always, if it was a weekend, she was with me. She would go with me on tours, doing wellness checks, doing all that work because I had my own local franchise. And then I launched franchising for others. We moved Lila into her assisted living, and we always do a wellness check within 72 hours after they move in, lay eyes on them, make sure that they're doing good in their transition. We showed up at the assisted living, and I said, "Oh, I'm here to check up on Lila." They said, "Lila's missing." And I said, "I don't even know what that means. Can you define what this means?" We're in Arizona, it's 118 degrees in the summer. They said that literally she walked away from the assisted living. I said, "Well, I don't see any police. Have you called the police?" And they hadn't called. I mean, boy, I was like some shrieking Mary. Because this was like crisis, like the urgency. And I think too, because understanding dehydration,
Mm,
being elderly, like there were so many things why this was so the reaction should have been panic mode.
mhm.
So my daughter and I go out and not to be dismissive, but almost like a dog where you're yelling for your dog that's lost out there. And we were screaming, going up and down the street, screaming, Lila. I was like, you need to call the police.
Mhm.
And, oh my gosh, it was just heart-wrenching, that bottom line is I found Lila. Somehow, some way, she made her way back to her original house,
Mm,
which was all the way across town. And, she made it there. She really wasn't able to talk complete sentences, but somehow, some way, she made her way back there. That was the last place that I looked. We hunted her down. Meanwhile, her family was driving from California, they were gonna go to the original place that they lost her. So I had to move her to the small home that was licensed for, I believe it was licensed for 6 or 8 people versus one that was 150 people. I was calling the family and saying, "Hey, we've gotta change, got good news and bad news." And oh, that the bad news is the place that I thought was gonna be appropriate for Lila is absolutely not a good fit. The good news is I've already found her another place, she's getting all tucked in, we have a new address where to meet, and, they were just like, "Oh my god, we're so grateful to you," and I'm like, "Oh, you have no idea, like, you're grateful, like, I'm like, I was entrusted to care for this person, and they lost her,
Mm.
After that, like I said, Lila really couldn't speak because her dementia had progressed so much, but I would go to visit her because when we had a client, when we placed them for life. We were connected. We would check up with the family every 6 months until, they pass, and every time I would go to visit Lila, she would just clap and, just so excited, but yeah, that was horrible, and my daughter got to watch me, absolutely lose my cool, then think methodically about, "Okay, step into action, like, we've gotta do this." And then going forward, that place instituted all kinds of policies on how to conduct from pictures of their residents to the process of calling the police. They put in all kinds of systems after that. But Lila was the sacrificial lamb, their first lost resident, and thank God that nothing bad happened, but when you're dealing with the elderly, especially with dementia and these things, I don't have enough fingers and toes for stories, but with my franchisees, because I ran my own local business first, there was not a story that they could share with me that I probably hadn't already experienced.
Mm.
Which made it so I was able to live vicariously through the franchisees and their shenanigans that were not quite Miss Lila, but I would say somewhere in that realm of mishaps that in real life can happen.
Well, God bless you for finding Lila. Do you believe in karma, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm Chinese and we deeply believe in karma. And so, I hope that all the goodwill, all the lives that you changed, touched, inspire, come back to you. That's a beautiful story. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Are there, it says you are at a very unique place because you help people basically live the rest of the life, the end of their life, in a graceful, dignified way. Are there any kind of lessons that you learn? What are some things that really help these elderlies thrive at the end of their life? Is there anything that's cared to share for audience members who may have aging parents and who is thinking about this type of things?
Yeah, it is about a lot of it is about respect, and people are fearful. They're fearful of moving away from what they're familiar with. And so, just be patient, try to meet them where they're at. Not that this is the end of the world. Try to dip their toe into change. So if they're moving to assisted living, try it out for 30 days, try it out for 90 days. Let's see how this works out. And when they get that human connection could be even they're just watching people in their day to day. That could be their full activity because before they've been isolated in their own home or
Mhm.
something like that, but they didn't have that social lubrication. And so now, just even seeing all the activities that are happening, sometimes you have to parent your parent. So when safety is an issue, sometimes you have to take some necessary moves. Nobody wants to be in that situation where they have to parent their parent, but you might be forced into it and try to get that contingency plan in place. It's better to have a plan and not need it and not have it.
There you go.
So, yeah. And then from the elderly standpoint, they genuinely do not see themselves, regardless of how old they are or how many wrinkles they might have. Inside, they still feel like they're 20 something. And so when we would tour that elderly person to the assisted living, they would say, "Oh my God, everybody here is old." And and you can look at them, look at the other people, look back at them, and you're seeing, no, they fit right in, but
Uh-huh.
to them, they don't. And
Yeah.
so That is something that internally, I think we all hang on to, having that spirit of being younger,
Mhm.
that our young self. And so, but that was a universal kind of comment that I would get that would always amuse me for that. But the other side of it is, really don't live with regrets. Try to be a yes person and experience the joy and have opportunities, take advantage of the opportunities that you have. And so it's those are the only regrets. Worked too much, didn't take that vacation, didn't do that trip, waited until they thought they would travel when they hit a certain age, and then something happened. And so it's really leaning into being that yes person when opportunity presents it.
I see, and it may be a reason why you travel so much now. You're
Yes.
taking their lessons really great.
I do,
Yeah.
I take it to heart because that mobility and your physical health and agility, especially if you're going to other countries where sidewalks and transportation and all of that, I mean, it really is the to get in, embrace some of those, real experiences, you've gotta be physically agile to do it, so not that I plan on not being physically agile, but yeah, now I'm enjoying it now.
Oh, beautiful. Well, one of the things that I was dying to ask you is there's a little bit different model of assisted living in Taiwan. That's where I'm from. So the way they do it is very much like a college campus, but for older people, right? So there's lots of programs for learning, for athletics, for all kinds of things. I haven't really visited assisted living spaces here in the United States, but the vibe's a little bit different. From your perspective, do you see that kind of community building type of activities be helpful, or these elderly
Absolutely.
population thriving in it?
I think that the younger generation who are aging up are demanding more. They want more amenities, they want more focus on health and wellness, not supportive living. The average age of somebody going to assisted living is 84, 85.
Mm,
So they're typically really waiting until something, the assisted livings are now what the nursing homes used to be. There used to be more 55 and older communities that were super active. I do think that the facilities, the communities now are adding in a lot more like balance classes and yoga classes and doing different physical activities, getting more restaurant style, having more community campuses that it's independent living. You can age in place, do assisted living, really wanting more of those amenities and activities. But it's not there yet. There's only a select that offer what you're offering, and I think that it's so important. Usually, most communities have 1 or 2 activity directors.
mhm.
It's kinda your general what you think about, but what you're describing, I think that that's gonna be more of a shift in as the future to be more competitive and keep people healthier longer.
So speaking of shift, let me shift into your new thing. I'm curious though, because you went from assisted living, taking care of the elderly, and to influencer marketing, which is very, very different space. I'm curious, why did you shift away from taking care of the elderly, hospitality, that kind of space into this totally brand new thing?
Yeah, well, it's actually a couple different things. So one is being in the role that we were in, we're heavily influence influencing the families that we're working with and referral sources and things like that. How do people hear about us? So there's a lot of building trust and authenticity and what we do.
Mhm.
And, so that's been a part of the DNA in that, but what I can tell you is I was inspired by a gentleman, his name is Andrew Steele. I met him on a plane. I've met the most amazing people on planes. He was one of these people that I met in January of 23, and he asked me what I did, and I gave him a little spiel on assisted living locators. He had never heard of that, and asked him what he did, and he said he was an influencer, and I said, "I've heard of that, but can you define what that means?" And he described his very specific target audience that was not my audience. His audience was, affluent males 45 and older. And I'm like, yeah, ours are the female, same age bracket, but his the males aren't typically the ones that we're trying to get their attention. And so we really had some in-depth conversation and we stayed in touch. What he shared about, what he did. And so the following year, I met with this chief marketing officer of Yum Brands, which is Kentucky Fried Chicken, Taco Bell. And he, again, at the International Franchise Association, he was on a panel. All I want to know is, do you guys use influencers? So I sat through this whole course just to see, were they going to cover this topic? Basically, they fell into influencers when one of their sandwiches went viral, and then they reverse engineered, and now it's a huge part of what their budget goes for. So I go to tons of franchise conferences and have a lot of franchisor friends and associates. And so I did research for those 2 years, just, asking, "Do you use influencers?" And I just got this look. No, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big Kentucky Frieds, McDonald's, they do, but the other companies that are moderate to smaller size, absolutely not. Have no idea how to effectively use that. And so, taking my matchmaking skills and authenticity is wanting to help franchisors and their franchisees matching with influencers that can bring them candidates or bring their franchisees more business uniquely based on where they're at. And so it's been something that's been brewing for behind the scenes for 2 years. My research has been an overdrive.
So was it kind of like a pixel loading on a browser, a little bit more clarity at a time and I'm going to create this next thing, influencer marketing. Was it over time or was there like a light switch
It was a
moment?
lightning. When I sat down to Andrew, I was so inspired by what he did that my research began immediately because I knew in my own world that that had never even been on the menu. And so I thought, my gosh, I can disrupt this whole other industry again and get a second a second bite at the apple of being a disruptor because I enjoy it. It's hard. It's really hard, but I love when you see your visions just so clearly that being able to share that enthusiasm and pivot. And in the franchising world, I've really built a lot of respect out there with my colleagues and that franchising is a general rule. I'm not somebody who's just a fly by night. I've been around for over 2 decades. I've achieved in franchising hitting over 160 franchises. There's different things that I've been around for a hot minute. So I really understand what it is that matchmaking
Okay.
capability.
So on this podcast, we nerd out about aha moments quite a bit. We nerd out about pivotal moments, his difficulty, the lower points. How do you stay resilient coming out of that? Dark night of the soul. That was what I was looking for, right? Then we also nerd out about the aha moments. Because once we let go of whatever we're holding on to, limiting beliefs, traumas, and otherwise, usually a whole world open up, right? Spaciousness, energy, and then creative ideas come. So if you don't mind talking a little bit meta about how you engineer the aha moments, or was it just purely divine, accidental, serendipity, synchronicity?
I think it was serendipitous that my path crossed with Andrew's. And another big moment for me was, I wasn't quite sure, how the missing pieces. I just saw the big picture and then it was going to be reverse engineering. And I intersected with a gentleman at YPO that had 16 patents and he created the rapid ramen cooker and used influencer marketing to blow up his brands and had the Walmart and was Amazon and all these different things and sold those off. So I consulted with him and he's a part of my team right now because he's already has those pieces together, the influencers, the contracts, that back end operations of how do you find the right influence? How do you do the measurement of the micro macro? Those the details of that and that level that he's already been viral with, what he did and successfully accomplished this. And so taking his knowledge and bringing that into my franchisor world with somebody who's already done it. I don't need to, I learned, it's not that fun, paving the way. Being
Well, you
that
seem to like
pioneer.
it. You do it multiple
Well, if
times.
somebody's already created something, you can get
Uh-huh.
there faster and more knowledgeable through what they've already done.
Mm,
So, do I need to go and learn about all these contracts? No, having him on
mm.
board, bringing that institutional knowledge of what he's done and done successfully and things he learned. Again, that's one of the things that I love about and the opportunities, they're all around us. You just have to open yourself up and be unapologetic in your conversations that you have. And if it connects, if you put it out there and you connect, then it's a beautiful thing.
Well, let me ask you this. Is that optimism, that open-mindedness gifted? Have you always been that way, or you cultivated that over time and you train yourself to stay, open and talk to someone right next to the plane? Because most people, they look at their phone, they go to sleep, they watch movies, they don't talk to the person right next to them, right? But there lies the missing opportunity. Have you always been open-minded and wanting to grow and look at the world through clear eyes and mind?
I do. I love hearing people's stories. And when I hear people's stories, it just makes my mind start to work, get things energized. Either I'm like, how can I take this knowledge of what they're sharing? Or sometimes you just file it and then you pull it back out. Oh, yeah, I remember why I learned this. I do have to clarify, I don't talk to every single person on the plane. Sometimes if I'm just tired and I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to be engaging, then I don't. I can tell you, I've got a whole list of people, at least 10 people, and they're in my phone by airplane. That's their first, their before their name. It's Airplane Mike, Airplane Andrew, Airplane, you know. Yeah, a Netflix producer, head of the lab core for, the Northern America, somebody who is in Hawaii who creates custom glass for custom houses and things like that. Just such a wide variety of innovative and very unique people that for whatever reason, I intersected with.
I love that. So I also love that you already are part of YPO and this huge network of doers and achievers and innovators in the world, and you're still open to talk to people right next to you on the airplane. That's pretty awesome. How do you use this network of entrepreneurs and innovators? How do you leverage? How do you use this network of beautiful people to create something even more beautiful in the world?
It is still a work in progress for now that I'm shifting, but I can give one example. There is a founder, CEO, her name is Danielle, who's got a whole skincare line, and she's based out of California. And she's got 1,000 influencers under contract for her brand and for that. So, really finding out from her and what's the good, the bad, the ugly type of things for that. I've got 3 things that I wanna get accomplished in this lifetime. The influencer, Sweet Influencer is one of those, but I also am creating an app that is a beauty app that's like a bestie in an app, and it's called Slaymate. And so I was working on my logo, and so when I was in
So you're not a serial entrepreneur, you're a parallel entrepreneur. So you already have some of this stuff bubbling up that you're kind of working on as a hobby.
I use this app when I'm traveling. It's like mirror, mirror on the wall. How do I look today? And
Uh-huh.
then it'll rate me on a 1 to 10, and then it tells me what improvements that
Uh-huh.
I can do, what's working and what I could do to improve if I choose to.
Mhm.
And even coordinating some different outfits and things like that. So it's almost ready for beta testing. I had the people that were in New Orleans that I was able to say, "Hey, what's your opinion on these different logos?" I've got it narrowed down to 4 logos. One of them is really strong. That's a strong contender, but I'm able to email out Danielle and get great feedback from people and that even add on one more thing. Well, what if you added this? And so it's not being afraid to put it out there and be humbled. Again, because we're working with people that work Fortune 100 companies that are billionaires all over in the spectrum that are in YPO. It's such a mix of that. And being okay with where you're at in your journey that you're on. If you don't put it out there, I wouldn't have known Danielle. If I wouldn't have mentioned that, she wouldn't have been able to share it. Well, I've got 1,000 influencers. Let's talk. Slaymate is my second that, and that'll be automated. It's AI that is in progress right now. And then I want to do a nonprofit that combines Slaymate and Sweet Influencers, and it's called Slay It Forward, like pay it
Mhm.
forward, but
Mm.
it's slay it forward. I want to work with foster children in creating a suitcase that is curated for that. And it could be products from influencers, it could be people donate when they buy certain products. But Slaymate creating curated suitcases for children in foster care, help them look and feel their best.
Mm.
So those are my three things. And if I can accomplish and be semi-successful in any one or all of those, then check that box. Like I'm a happy day.
I see great future in these ideas. I
Well,
see great
thank
future.
you.
So if you look at these dreams that you have, what would you
Yes.
say is the underlying purpose, if there is any? Like, what's a direction, right? Because I'm sure you hear people, especially in the YPO space, legacy and purpose. How would you put words to something that's very esoteric and hard to describe?
All of these align with things that give me joy and give me purpose. The Sweet Influencers is really that one is probably going to be the heaviest lift. I already use Slaymate. I love it. And I am just overjoyed with that. It's not for everybody, but it's something that, especially for people that travel and do things by themselves, it truly is your bestie in an app. And I screenshot it, like it'll tell me maybe not today, specifically because I didn't rate myself today, but it might say at the end, I may have started at a 7.5, I finished at a 9, and I'll screenshot it and I'll send it to one of my good friends. And I say, today's going to be a good day. And I'll do it. Anything I hit over 8.5, I'll just screenshot it. It requires no words. And she's like, good day, thumbs up, you know? And so just I think you find joy in that. And then the giving back with how do I take what right now I have been more exposed with foster children and it's become aware I'm moving from Alzheimer's and that has been my foundation that I've gone to for years. But as I transition to this new, this has become something that now I feel like this is something that really is near and dear and true that I feel I can bring what I'm currently doing overlapping and bring me joy and that.
I love that. Well, Angela, we cover a lot of ground today. Is there any questions that you hoped that I asked, but I didn't ask?
No, I think you covered such a wide gamut. You interview such interesting, wide background of people. So, no, I feel like you touched on the highs, the lows, the fun, the sadness, or kind of all of those.
Well,
So,
actually, there is one thing I forgot to ask.
oh,
One topic that we'd ask quite a bit is similar to purpose, which is spirituality. You had mentioned a few words. I'm assuming you're a pretty spiritual person. Is there any spiritual practices that you have to ground yourself in the moments of uncertainty, in the moments of doubt, in the moments of insecurity, in the moments of fear that just grounds you so that you can keep going, keep believing, keep having that faith in yourself, in the greater universe?
I'm Christian, I'm Catholic, but more important than that, I do think you talked about karma and you talked about those things. So I do think that power of positivity and spirituality of just hanging on to knowing nothing too good or too bad lasts for too long and anchoring on to my faith when something is just rotten, knowing nothing too good or too bad is going to last for too long. And, the path is in front of me. So stay the course. And that mantra will help remind me of just keeping on that path.
Beautiful. Well, I want to take a moment to acknowledge you, Angela. Thank you for how you're showing up here. I know that I'm a total stranger, and yet you share so generously your life stories, your wisdom, your experience from being a nurse to a franchisor to 160 franchise. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Thank you so much for being here on Noble Warrior. I'm sure a lot of people are very inspired, as I am, about this beautiful thing called life.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you very much.